Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to episode 77 of the Unslaved podcast. My name is David Whitehead, and very excited today for this show. We're going to be talking, Michael and I are going to be talking about Michael's new book, Dragon Mother, as well as the accompanying, really, it's the appendices that Michael's been putting together for our premium members at unslaved.com, where he's been doing slideshow presentations, going through all the names, dates, and ideas that are contained in his book, all the references that are there for you. And we're going to be highlighting some of those points today because this subject of we've been talking on the show of the rise of communism and socialism again in the West, talking a little bit about neo-feminism. You got all these different waves of feminism, and the current wave that we're in right now has been incredibly toxic to both men and women. And so we're going to be getting into that, and also the historical roots of these ideas. These ideas did not just spring up yesterday. There's nothing new under the sun, so to speak. These kind of ideas are linked to ancient occult philosophies and sort of these fraternal orders that go back into the ancient world. We've talked about them many times on this show. And when you compare notes with what people in the 1800s even were writing back then about some of these Marxist concepts and feminist concepts, you'll start to see it's exactly the same stuff that's being brought out today in these universities and in the mainstream media. So Michael, welcome. And where would you like to get started for people today?
Well, it's been a year in the planning, this show. We should first say that Dragon Mother came out in last year. So we had, to build the podcast itself. And, we didn't want to do it right away. So this is, for me, very special. It's a great feeling of achievement to get that book done since this research started in '89. Maybe we can talk a bit about those days. Because this is actually, whether people know it or not, I may have said it in passing before, the oldest subject I have studied as a writer, as a thinker, as a person who wanted to research the deepest roots of evil, the deepest roots of psychology. So this subject on female psychology is actually the oldest and longest subject I have studied, but it's also one I've not been forced to be quiet about, but just chose to be quiet about until I know I could do it incredible justice, which I feel I've done now with the publishing of the book. And then again, this very week, we've just put up the second part of the program. So, it's been a long time coming. So right now on the premium section, both programs are up. And I should also just say an overview that the program is not identical to the book. As you quite rightly said, these are appendices, really. There's 4 appendices in the actual book, and this program should be considered their 5th. So people who want to take shortcuts and think that this program is a detailed one-to-one description of what's in the book, we just have to dispel that idea, because they're not. These are incredible parallel lines. The 3 appendices at the end of the book, and we could multiply those ad infinitum. What I mean is that no one person, no one theory, no one program it could ever come to the bottom of investigating, the male psyche, the female psyche. That's impossible. And all my work, I don't care if it's the Atlantis book or Irish Origins or even this, I think of them as kickstarts, of subjects that have lapsed for years. Everyone knows that about my Irish Origins. Who ever heard of Commons Beaumont, right? Or the Atlantis thing about, hey, Atlantis wasn't the great place everybody says it was. So all these original ideas, they can, again, themselves just fall dead off the press, or they can be a kickstart for other people to go, I never thought of it that way. And so Dragon Mother falls into the same old category. I've dealt with controversial subjects all my life. I know this is controversial, but hey, so what? That's my livelihood. So it doesn't faze me that nitwits and fruitcakes and extremely sensitive PC types, refuse again. We're in a world now, as you well know, that actually now prohibits us even raising questions, right? Google have prohibited people who have the word racism in their subject matter. Mm. These are ultra-left people who are not even going to use it in any kind of controversial way. This is a fact. These are already ultra-left people. But those people have been banned from speaking at the Google headquarters or on TED or wherever it might be, just because the word itself, the dictionary word, is being used, that might upset somebody in the freaking audience. Okay? So, don't any of our audience ever confuse us with those people. We are not politically correct. We are not sensitive. We are not tenderized by any KGB central or any communist international or any feminist organization. We're not misogynist and we're not racist, but we are not going to bow down and then not investigate just because something has now been deemed politically incorrect. But see, the narrative, they're manipulating the narrative. They want to get their people in power, in the centers of government, in the education. We're educators, aren't we? But unfortunately, they want to monopolize that situation to get people like ourselves well and truly out, or anyone who even listens to us. They don't want them in, any position where they can have people like us who might talk about the origin of the women's movement, or keep up bringing that pesky word communism or Fabianism, things that they would think have well and truly been hidden in this. And again, we're dealing with insane people, different grades of insanity. So where, I critique a guy called Eli Sagan. His book is one of the themes of the Dragon Mother program. I don't deal with it in the book, but in the program I go after these Marxists, these Marcuse school postmodernists and deconstructionists. I go after them to show how shoddy their research is. And their shoddy research, it doesn't need to be a top Harvard, intellectual like Sagan. It can be the person you're meeting in the street who's a leftist. If you only have done a little bit of homework, a little bit of research, you will be able to contradict and disempower them utterly by showing the flaws. Because by the very fact they're socialist, all right, and I don't care if it's some anarchist nutball, or it's some Occupy movement, or it's even a sort of college teacher type, all the way up to a professor of Sagan's eminence. A very, very ordinary person, layman, could take them down once you know just some simple basic facts. Because by the definition, by the very fact that they're socialist, they're pretty much not sane. They're on a scale of insanity, let alone intellectually, insightful or consistent. So the good news is it doesn't take much, but the bad news for lazy buggers who should know better is that, yeah, there's a modicum of research that you need to do. We're one of your chief sources for that. We're also quite unbiased. But we will point you in the direction, you see, of immense names, as you said, from history, or from, say, Aaron Rousseau, or Yuri Bezmenov, KGB agents, whistleblowers, G. Edward Griffin. We will point you in the direction, chapter and verse, of every single subject we cover, to show that it is not just to get subscribers, or just willy-nilly, off the cuff, instantly dredged up subject matter. Everything that I deal with has been researched for almost 30 years now, 20, 25, 26 years. And this one, as I said, goes back the longest.
Yeah, well, I was watching your presentation there for the premium members that you put up, Michael, and it was just blowing me away how many sources you do cite, and the direction that you're taking with it is just exceptional. And for anybody that might be put off by the title Dragon Mother, what are you saying, all women are dragons or something? You really have to understand the definitions there. Even going back into some of these ancient schools, going back to Egypt and maybe even before, of the idea of even what the symbol of the dragon is. And would you be able to maybe give a quick synopsis of why you chose that title, and the idea that you're describing there as a sort of a benign feminine quality and a malignant feminine quality? And it's almost like in the ancient, they would always have the good dragon wrestling the bad dragon and all these different things. How do we enter the dragon with people here, Michael?
Well, the title Dragon Mother is benign, straight up benign. It shouldn't be confused with Terrible Mother. We'll get into that later on. But Dragon Mother is not my theory. That is a well-known psychological and psychomythological concept that you'll find, through your Otto Ranks and your Rudolf Ottos and Hans Zimmer and Missy Eliade and Joseph Campbell and Carl Gustav Jung, and pretty much everybody who's involved with mythology, sociology, anthropology, that kind of thing is quite familiar with the Dragon Mother. It's only in our paltry, politically correct times, that this concept is not known. And not to mention the fact that evil women, if you even want to go to the full length, then the concept of evil women is acknowledged. Although, again, we have a problem when we come up to the late 20th century and then the 21st century. We don't have too much work on that. But It's coming back, which I'm glad to see. But even in historical terms, right, phylogenetic terms, yeah, have Esther in the Bible opening the gates, the deceiver, in the time of Babylon, the book of Esther. It's a female who's destroys Babylon, right? We have Salome, a quintessential archetypal evil figure. You have the Herods. You have a plethora of evil goddesses all through religion and mythology. You even have evil mothers, Medea, child murderesses, evil wives, deceptive creatures like that. We have the Angela Merkels of today, a real Medusa there, but as I said, and even though there's a good beginning again to look at the question of female violence in modern times, with the rising rates of spousal abuse from women, and the gradual awareness from people that women are maybe not as empathic and as sensitive types as we may have traditionally believed. These are all very, very good, but I can recommend certainly books in the links department. Very few, I must say, very few of any academic credibility. Maybe Phyllis Chesler's, Woman's Inhumanity Against Woman. That's the only one I can really think of that has an academic sort of prowess that's anti-feministic, in the sense that she is a leading feminist, but she wrote this book from a more of a neutral point of view to bring out some of the negative side of women. And I'd like people to buy that book just to read the introduction, where she then tells you about the scourging that she had from not just ultra-feminists, but from women in general, who begged her, some of her best friends begged her not to publish the book because it would compromise this mystique, basically, is the only way to mention it. But you're quite right. But yeah, the Dragon Mother then splits into two when a child is traditionally born. And based on her own psychology, she can divide into what then is called, in mythological terms, the terrible mother or the good mother. She's called dragon simply because that was the ancient symbol, the serpent, the Ouroboros, especially the Ouroboros serpent eating its own tail. That's an enigmatic symbol that has taken on other permutations based on whatever culture or tradition you're coming from. But if you trace that symbol back to its origin, it is a birth symbol. It's a Ouroboros symbol. Erich Neumann, who my book is dedicated to, and the Dragon Mother book actually deals with some of his theories. I update those theories because the book that he wrote that interests me, it was only published after his demise, after he passed on, and it was compiled in a fairly haphazard manner. So one of the duties of my work, Dragon Mother, one of the dedications of the book, was to present Erich Neumann's those lost papers, basically, that were compiled into this travesty of a book after his death, and not even many Jungians are aware of it, let alone anybody else. So I'd read it years ago, loved it, wanted to do justice to it, and that's again another sense of great accomplishment, that I feel the last couple of years to have done that. But Erich Neumann traces it back, and he's famous for his books on goddess traditions, and even in those books he mentions that this enclosing serpent is such a ambivalent symbol, but it basically is a pleromic Ouroboros symbol that talks about the kind of prenatal consciousness of an infant. Of course, later on we'll get into this in maybe a bit greater detail, and through the book I go into it in immense detail. And like the great Otto Rank, Erich Neumann had understood that where Freud, I would never say got it wrong, because that's far too critical. He didn't get anything wrong. In fact, he got a lot right. It's just that the dates are shifted forward to that the formation of consciousness for a young boy or girl is sort of moved between the ages of 2 years old, or let's be generous, 1 year old, just after birth, all the way up to say 6 and 7, which is known as the latency period. And the period between is the famous Oedipus complex, or Oedipus stages, right? But Newman, who was a Jungian more than a Freudian, and probably nodding very greatly to the work of Otto Rank, who was actually preceded him with this theory, decided that, look, see back before that period, especially in the prenatal period when the child is in the womb, that's an eternity. It's just like, where the hindbrain is 17 centimeters in distance from the forebrain, but millions of years are encapsulated in development, phylogenetically in those 17, I don't know if it's centimeters or millimeters, can't remember, but I mean, either way, it would be a small gap. But in that small gap are millions of years of development. He understood that similar thing, that in the womb, there is no time. you know, there's not even real existence as we know it. There's something else going